In the heart of a bustling city stood a large shopping mall, a place where people from all walks of life came together to shop, eat, and spend time with their loved ones. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon, filled with the usual sounds of chatter, footsteps, and the hum of activity. Families strolled through the corridors, children laughed in the play areas, and shoppers browsed through stores looking for bargains. Among these people was John, a 42-year-old man with a calm demeanor and a warm smile. He had come to the mall to buy groceries for his family, just like he did every weekend. John lived a simple life. He worked as an accountant at a small firm, loved spending time with his wife and 2 kids, and enjoyed the little things that made life meaningful, like cooking dinner for his family or taking long walks in the park. On this particular day, he had planned to pick up some fresh produce and ingredients for a special meal he wanted to prepare for his wife's birthday. Little did anyone know this routine trip to the mall would become the center of attention for something no one could have predicted. As John stood in line at the checkout counter, patiently waiting to pay for his groceries, something unusual happened. Without warning, he suddenly clutched his chest, let out a faint groan, and collapsed onto the floor. The sound of his body hitting the ground caused a ripple of panic among the nearby shoppers. People froze, unsure of what to do, while others screamed for help. A young woman standing close by immediately dropped to her knees beside him and checked if he was breathing. When she realized he wasn't responsive, she shouted for someone to call emergency services. Within moments, chaos erupted around them. Shoppers gathered in a circle, watching anxiously as the woman, a nurse who happened to be at the mall, began performing CPR. She worked quickly and efficiently, trying her best to revive him. Her hands moved rhythmically on his chest, but despite her efforts, there was no sign of improvement. John remained motionless, his face pale and lifeless. The tension in the air was palpable as everyone waited for the paramedics to arrive. When the ambulance finally pulled up outside the mall, the paramedics rushed in with their equipment, pushing through the crowd. They took over from the nurse, continuing CPR and using a defibrillator in hopes of restarting John's heart. But after several agonizing minutes, they were forced to step back. There was nothing more they could do. John was declared dead at the scene. The news sent shockwaves through the mall, leaving everyone stunned and grief-stricken. How could a seemingly healthy man just drop dead? Who was he? What had caused such a sudden tragedy? The authorities arrived shortly afterward to secure the area and begin their investigation. They cordoned off the section of the mall where John had collapsed, asking witnesses to share what they had seen. Many described him as calm and unassuming, showing no signs of distress before the incident. Some recalled seeing him browsing through the aisles earlier, chatting briefly with store staff about vegetables. Others mentioned how he seemed to be in good spirits, smiling as he interacted with fellow shoppers. No one could understand why this had happened. Meanwhile, John's body was taken to the hospital for an autopsy. Doctors needed to determine the exact cause of death, not only for legal purposes but also to provide closure to his grieving family. Initial examinations revealed no visible injuries or trauma that might explain his sudden collapse. His medical history showed no record of serious illnesses like heart disease or diabetes. He appeared to be a perfectly healthy man in the prime of his life. Yet here he was, gone without warning. This baffling mystery left even experienced pathologists scratching their heads. As word of the incident spread, it became the talk of the town. Social media platforms buzzed with speculation. Friends and acquaintances of John shared memories of him, painting a picture of a kind and hard-working individual who cherished his family above all else. Reporters flocked to the mall, interviewing witnesses and gathering details for their stories. Everyone wanted answers, but none were forthcoming. The question lingered in everyone's minds. What had killed John? Back at the hospital, doctors continued their work, determined to uncover the truth. Blood samples were sent to the lab for analysis, and toxicology tests were ordered to rule out poisoning or drug-related causes. Specialists pored over X-rays and scans, searching for any abnormalities that might shed light on the situation. But as the hours turned into days, frustration mounted. Everything pointed to the fact that John should still be alive. There was no logical explanation for his death. One doctor, however, refused to give up. Dr. Emily Carter, a seasoned pathologist known for her meticulous approach, decided to take a closer look at John's brain tissue. Something about the case didn't sit right with her. While examining microscopic slides under the microscope, she noticed something strange, a faint discoloration in certain areas of his neural pathways. At first glance, it looked insignificant, almost like a minor anomaly that could easily be overlooked. But Dr. Carter's instincts told her to dig deeper. Using advanced imaging techniques and chemical analyses, she isolated the discolored regions and subjected them to further scrutiny. What she discovered left her speechless. Embedded within John's brain tissue were tiny crystalline structures that shouldn't exist naturally in the human body. These crystals were unlike anything she had ever encountered before. Their composition suggested they were synthetic, possibly engineered in a laboratory. But how had they ended up inside John's brain, and could they have been responsible for his sudden death? Dr. Carter knew she was onto something big. She immediately called a meeting with her colleagues to discuss her findings. The room fell silent as she presented her evidence. The implications were staggering. If these crystals were indeed linked to John's death, then this wasn't just a medical mystery. It was a potential breakthrough that could challenge everything we thought we knew about human biology and technology. The team agreed to keep investigating, knowing that unraveling this puzzle could change lives forever. As news of the discovery began to circulate within the hospital, whispers turned into conversations, and soon, the story reached the ears of journalists and researchers alike. Questions swirled around the source of the crystals. Were they part of some secret experiment? Had John been exposed to something dangerous without his knowledge? Or was this evidence of something far more extraordinary, perhaps even extraterrestrial? The possibilities seemed endless, and the public's imagination ran wild. For John's family, however, the focus remained on finding answers. His wife, Sarah, struggled to come to terms with her loss. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than met the eye. Determined to get to the bottom of things, she reached out to experts, lawyers, and anyone who might help her understand what had happened to her husband. Her journey was just beginning, and it would lead her down a path filled with shocking revelations and unimaginable truths. Little did anyone know John's death was not an isolated incident. As the investigation expanded, connections began to emerge between his case and other unexplained deaths across the country. Each victim shared one thing in common: traces of the same mysterious crystalline material found in their bodies. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, painting a picture of a much larger conspiracy, one that went far beyond the walls of the shopping mall where John had taken his last breath. The discovery of the mysterious crystalline structures in John's brain sent shockwaves through the medical community. Doctors and scientists who had initially dismissed his death as a tragic but isolated incident now found themselves grappling with questions that defied conventional understanding. How could synthetic materials, clearly engineered by human hands, or perhaps something beyond human capability, end up inside a man's neural pathways? And more importantly, what role had they played in his sudden collapse? Dr. Emily Carter, the pathologist who first identified the crystals, became consumed by the case. She spent countless hours poring over data, running tests, and consulting colleagues from various fields. Her team included neurologists, biochemists, and even physicists, each bringing their expertise to bear on the enigma. Together, they worked tirelessly to analyze the composition of the crystals. What they uncovered was nothing short of astonishing. Using advanced spectroscopy techniques, the team determined that the crystals were made of an alloy so complex and precise that it surpassed anything currently known to science. The material exhibited properties that seemed almost otherworldly. It conducted electricity at levels far beyond typical metals, yet remained stable under extreme conditions. Even more puzzling was its ability to interact with biological tissue without triggering an immune response. This meant that the crystals could have been present in John's body for months, maybe even years, without causing any noticeable symptoms until the day he collapsed. But how had they gotten there? That question haunted everyone involved in the investigation. Dr. Carter theorized that prolonged exposure to the material might have allowed it to infiltrate John's bloodstream, eventually making its way to his brain. However, this raised another issue. Where could someone like John, a middle-class accountant with no ties to cutting-edge research or experimental technology, have encountered such a substance? It didn't add up. As the days passed, the story gained national attention. News outlets picked up on the bizarre details, sensationalizing the findings and fueling public curiosity. Headlines screamed about mystery crystals and unexplained deaths, while social media buzzed with theories ranging from government experiments to alien interference. Some speculated that John had unknowingly become part of a secret project testing new forms of artificial intelligence or mind control. Others suggested the crystals might be remnants of extraterrestrial technology, hinting at a larger conspiracy involving UFOs and hidden knowledge. Amidst the frenzy, John's family struggled to cope with the loss. His wife, Sarah, was overwhelmed, not only by grief but also by anger. She couldn't understand how her husband, a loving father and devoted provider, could simply vanish from her life because of something she couldn't comprehend. When she learned about the crystals, her confusion turned into determination. She demanded answers, vowing to uncover the truth behind her husband's death. Sarah reached out to investigative journalists, hoping to draw attention to the case and pressure authorities into taking action. One journalist, a seasoned reporter named Mark Reynolds, took particular interest in the story. Known for his relentless pursuit of justice, Mark had covered numerous high-profile cases involving corruption and cover-ups. He agreed to meet with Sarah, listening intently as she recounted everything she knew about John's final days. Mark's instincts told him there was more to this than met the eye. He began digging deeper, filing Freedom of Information Act requests, and interviewing experts in nanotechnology and biophysics. His efforts led him to a classified research facility located on the outskirts of the city, dubbed Project Nexus. The facility had once been at the forefront of experimental neuroscience, exploring ways to enhance human cognition using advanced materials. However, the project had been shut down years earlier due to ethical concerns and safety risks. Official reports claimed all materials related to the experiments had been destroyed, but Mark suspected otherwise. With the help of a whistleblower, a former employee of the facility, Mark uncovered documents detailing the development of a revolutionary alloy designed to interface directly with the human brain. The alloy, codenamed Nexium-9, was intended to boost memory retention, accelerate learning, and even repair damaged neural pathways. But early trials revealed devastating side effects. Test subjects experienced seizures, hallucinations, and in some cases, sudden death. Fearing backlash, the researchers allegedly buried the evidence and halted the project indefinitely. What shocked Mark most was the whistleblower's claim that small quantities of Nexium-9 had gone missing during the shutdown process. No one knew exactly how much or where it had ended up. Could these rogue samples have somehow made their way into the environment? Was it possible that John had been exposed to them unknowingly? If true, this would mean that Project Nexus wasn't just responsible for one man's death. It represented a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Armed with this information, Mark published a series of exposés revealing the dark history of Project Nexus. The articles sparked outrage across the country, prompting calls for accountability and transparency. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, holding signs that read "Science without ethics kills and protect our brains." Lawmakers scrambled to address the growing crisis, introducing legislation aimed at regulating experimental technologies and ensuring proper oversight. For Sarah, the revelations brought both vindication and heartbreak. On one hand, she finally had proof that her husband's death wasn't random or meaningless. It was the result of negligence and greed. On the other hand, knowing the truth did little to ease her pain. Every night she lay awake wondering if John had suffered before. Collapsing. Had he felt afraid, confused, alone? These thoughts tormented her, driving her to seek justice not just for herself but for others who might fall victim to similar tragedies. Determined to hold those responsible accountable, Sarah hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit against the research facility. Her case quickly gained traction, drawing support from advocacy groups and victims' families alike. Lawyers argued that the facility had failed to properly dispose of hazardous materials, putting innocent lives at risk. Meanwhile, forensic experts worked to establish a direct link between Nexium-9 and the crystals found in John's brain. If successful, the lawsuit could set a precedent for holding corporations liable for the unintended consequences of their experiments. While the legal battle unfolded, scientists continued studying the crystals, hoping to unlock their secrets. Some believed the alloy held untapped potential, offering solutions to neurological disorders like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Others warned of the dangers posed by unchecked innovation, urging caution before pursuing further applications. Debates raged within academic circles, highlighting the delicate balance between progress and responsibility. Public sentiment shifted dramatically as more details emerged. People began questioning the ethics of pushing boundaries in science, especially when human lives were at stake. Schools incorporated discussions about Project Nexus into their curricula, teaching students the importance of weighing risks against rewards. Museums displayed replicas of the crystals alongside exhibits exploring the moral dilemmas of modern technology. Slowly but surely, John's story became a catalyst for change, inspiring conversations about how society should approach the future. Despite the progress being made, Sarah remained focused on honoring her husband's memory. She founded an advocacy group dedicated to raising awareness about the risks of emerging technologies and supporting families affected by similar tragedies. Through fundraisers, workshops, and community outreach programs, she worked tirelessly to ensure that no one else would suffer the same fate as John. For Sarah, this fight was personal. It was about turning her loss into a legacy of hope and resilience. As weeks turned into months, the case against the research facility grew stronger. Evidence mounted, linking the missing samples of Nexium-9 to several unexplained deaths over the past decade. Victims came forward, sharing their stories and demanding answers. Many had experienced strange symptoms, headaches, memory lapses, and episodes of disorientation before succumbing to fatal complications. Their testimonies painted a chilling picture of a hidden epidemic sweeping silently through unsuspecting communities. In response to mounting pressure, government officials launched a full-scale investigation into Project Nexus and other facilities conducting similar research. Inspectors combed through records, interviewed staff, and tested equipment for traces of illicit activity. Several executives were subpoenaed to testify before Congress, facing tough questions about their role in the scandal. Meanwhile, regulatory agencies tightened restrictions on experimental projects, requiring stricter protocols and greater transparency moving forward. Though the road ahead was long, Sarah found solace in knowing that her efforts were making a difference. Each new revelation brought her closer to closure, while each victory in court reinforced her belief in the power of perseverance. For her, John's death was not the end. It was the beginning of a movement aimed at protecting humanity from the unintended consequences of its own ambition. As the investigation into John's death deepened, the spotlight shifted to the classified research facility known as Project Nexus. What had once been a top-secret operation buried in obscurity was now thrust into the public eye, sparking outrage and demanding accountability. The whistleblower's revelations about Nexium-9, the synthetic alloy designed to interface with the human brain, had opened a Pandora's box of questions. How many others had been exposed? Was this a one-time oversight or part of a pattern of negligence? And most importantly, who else might be at risk? The whistleblower, a former lab technician named Daniel Harper, became a key figure in unraveling the mystery. Once an enthusiastic young scientist eager to make groundbreaking discoveries, Daniel had grown disillusioned after witnessing the reckless disregard for safety protocols within the facility. He described how researchers pushed boundaries without considering the long-term consequences of their work. It wasn't just about innovation anymore, he said during an emotional interview. It was about results. no matter the cost. Daniel recounted how test subjects in early trials of Nexium-9 began showing alarming side effects almost immediately. Some experienced excruciating migraines that left them bedridden for days. Others reported vivid hallucinations, claiming they could hear voices or see things that weren't there. A few even exhibited violent behavior, attacking staff members or themselves. Despite these red flags, the project leaders dismissed the incidents as minor setbacks, attributing them to natural variability rather than flaws in the technology. When fatalities occurred, panic set in, but not among the researchers. Instead of halting the experiments, they covered up the deaths, labeling them as unrelated medical emergencies or accidents. Families were paid off under strict confidentiality agreements, ensuring silence. Meanwhile, the remaining samples of Nexium-9 were supposed to be destroyed according to protocol. However, Daniel revealed that corners were cut during the disposal process. Records showed discrepancies in inventory logs, suggesting that significant quantities of the alloy went unaccounted for. Mark Reynolds, the investigative journalist covering the story, followed up on Daniel's claims by visiting nearby communities where Project Nexus conducted its operations. He spoke to residents living close to the facility, many of whom reported strange occurrences over the years. Some described finding metallic particles in their water supply, while others complained of persistent health issues like chronic fatigue, memory loss, and inexplicable seizures. One elderly man showed Mark a jar filled with shimmering dust he'd collected from his backyard, claiming it appeared shortly after construction work began near the facility. These accounts painted a chilling picture. Nexium-9 hadn't disappeared. It had leaked into the environment, infiltrating air, soil, and water sources. Over time, unsuspecting individuals like John may have absorbed trace amounts of the material through everyday activities such as breathing, drinking, or eating contaminated food. Given its ability to evade detection and integrate seamlessly, with biological systems, the alloy could remain dormant for years before causing catastrophic damage. Back at the hospital, Dr. Emily Carter and her team continued analyzing the crystals found in John's brain. Their findings corroborated Daniel's testimony and reinforced fears about the alloy's potential dangers. Microscopic imaging revealed that the crystalline structures acted like miniature circuits, forming networks within neural pathways and disrupting normal brain function. In some cases, they amplified electrical signals, leading to hyperactivity or seizures. In others, they blocked communication between neurons, resulting in memory loss or paralysis. Essentially, Nexium-9 turned the brain into a chaotic battleground, overwhelming its natural defenses. What made the situation even more alarming was the realization that the alloy was self-replicating. Under certain conditions, the crystals could grow and spread, multiplying exponentially until they overwhelmed the host. This explained why victims often deteriorated rapidly once symptoms appeared. It also raised concerns about whether the alloy could jump from person to person, potentially creating a chain reaction. If true, the implications were catastrophic, a silent epidemic spreading undetected across populations. Public reaction to these revelations was swift and intense. Social media exploded with hashtags like Stop Nexium-9 and Justice for John, as people demanded answers and action. Protesters marched outside government offices, holding placards depicting skulls overlaid with crystalline patterns. Parents voiced fears about their children's safety, urging schools to test playgrounds and classrooms for contamination. Environmental groups called for immediate cleanup efforts, warning of irreversible ecological damage if the alloy seeped further into nature. In response to mounting pressure, federal authorities launched a nationwide initiative to identify and contain all sources of Nexium-9 exposure. Specialized teams equipped with advanced detection devices scoured areas surrounding Project Nexus, collecting soil samples, testing water supplies, and scanning homes for traces of the alloy. They also established hotlines for citizens to report suspicious symptoms or environmental anomalies. Within weeks, dozens of cases surfaced linking victims to regions near other experimental facilities suspected of using similar materials. For Sarah, John's wife, the growing list of victims only deepened her resolve. She traveled across the country, meeting families affected by the crisis and sharing her story at rallies and press conferences. Her message was simple, yet powerful. No family should ever have to endure what we've gone through. We need transparency, accountability, and real change. Her courage inspired countless others to come forward, breaking the silence imposed by confidentiality agreements and fear of retaliation. Meanwhile, legal proceedings against Project Nexus gained momentum. Lawyers representing Sarah and other plaintiffs presented damning evidence tying the facility to widespread negligence. Internal memos revealed executives knowingly ignored warnings from their own scientists. Emails showed deliberate attempts to downplay risks and mislead regulators. Testimonies from former employees corroborated these allegations, painting a damning portrait of corporate greed and moral failure. The trial captivated audiences worldwide, drawing comparisons to landmark cases involving industrial disasters and pharmaceutical scandals. Day after day, witnesses took the stand, recounting harrowing experiences and shedding light on the human toll of unchecked ambition. Jurors listened intently, visibly moved by the stories of pain and loss. Even seasoned attorneys found themselves emotionally invested, recognizing the gravity of the case and its potential impact on future regulations. As the weeks passed, scientific breakthroughs added another layer of complexity to the unfolding drama. Researchers discovered that while Nexium-9 posed significant risks, it also held remarkable promise for treating neurological disorders. Preliminary studies suggested that properly controlled applications of the alloy could repair damaged neural connections, offering hope to millions suffering from conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and spinal cord injuries. This revelation sparked heated debates about the ethics of continuing research versus banning the material outright. Some argued that abandoning Nexium-9 altogether would squander an opportunity to revolutionize medicine. Others countered that the risks far outweighed any potential benefits, emphasizing the importance of prioritizing human safety above all else. Ethicists weighed in, proposing frameworks for responsible development and rigorous oversight. Public forums brought together experts, policymakers, and citizens to discuss the path forward, underscoring the need for collaboration and compromise. Against this backdrop of uncertainty, Sarah remained steadfast in her mission. She understood the value of scientific progress but refused to accept excuses for recklessness. Through her advocacy group, she advocated for stricter regulations, mandatory safety reviews, and greater transparency in research practices. She also pushed for financial compensation for victims and their families, arguing that justice required more than just apologies, it demanded tangible support. Her efforts bore fruit when lawmakers introduced sweeping reforms aimed at preventing similar tragedies in the future. Dubbed the Safe Science Act, the legislation mandated comprehensive risk assessments for all experimental projects, imposed severe penalties for noncompliance, and established independent oversight committees to monitor compliance. While critics argued the measures were too restrictive, supporters hailed them as a necessary step toward safeguarding humanity. By the time the trial concluded, the verdict was clear. Project Nexus was found guilty of gross negligence and ordered to pay billions in damages to victims and their families. Executives faced criminal charges and several resigned in disgrace. For Sarah, the outcome was bittersweet. Though vindicated, she knew no amount of money could bring John back. Yet she took solace in knowing that her fight had forced systemic changes, protecting countless lives in the process. As the dust settled, John's story became a symbol of resilience and accountability, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable loss, ordinary people can drive extraordinary change. Museums dedicated exhibits to the crisis, chronicling the events and lessons learned. Schools. As the legal battle against Project Nexus reached its climax, the world watched with bated breath. The trial had become more than just a court case. It was a reckoning for an entire system that prioritized profit over people, innovation over ethics, and secrecy over transparency. Every day brought new revelations, each one more shocking than the last. For Sarah, John's wife, it felt like standing at the edge of a storm, watching as lightning struck again and again, illuminating the dark corners of a conspiracy she never imagined existed. The turning point came when prosecutors presented evidence linking Nexium-9 not only to John's death, but also to dozens of other unexplained fatalities across the country. Medical records showed patterns eerily similar to John's case. Healthy individuals suddenly collapsing, their brains riddled with crystalline structures identical to those found in his neural pathways. Autopsies conducted on these victims revealed the same synthetic alloy, confirming what many had feared. This was no isolated incident. It was a widespread crisis hiding in plain sight. One particularly heart-wrenching testimony came from a mother named Lisa Thompson, whose teenage son Ethan had died under mysterious circumstances 2 years earlier. Like John, Ethan had been declared dead due to sudden cardiac arrest, despite having no prior health issues. At the time, doctors told Lisa they couldn't explain why her vibrant, athletic son had collapsed during basketball practice. But when investigators re-examined Ethan's medical records and brain tissue samples, they discovered traces of Nexium-9. Lisa took the stand, her voice trembling with emotion as she described the devastating impact of losing her child. "Ethan was my everything," she said, clutching a photograph of her smiling son. "He dreamed of becoming a doctor, of helping people. And now I know that his life was taken because someone decided he was expendable." Her words resonated deeply with everyone in the courtroom, including Sarah, who felt a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that her fight wasn't just about John, it was about all the lives destroyed by negligence and greed. The prosecution also called upon Dr. Emily Carter, the pathologist who first identified the crystals in John's brain. Under oath, Dr. Carter explained the intricate science behind Nexium-9, using diagrams and models to illustrate how the alloy interacted with human tissue. She emphasized that while the material held immense potential for advancing neuroscience, its risks were equally profound. Without proper safeguards, it could cause irreversible damage, or worse, spread uncontrollably. Dr. Carter's testimony was bolstered by expert witnesses from various fields, including neurology, environmental science, and bioethics. Together, they painted a comprehensive picture of the dangers posed by unchecked experimentation. One physicist even demonstrated how the alloy's self-replicating properties could lead to exponential growth if left unchecked, potentially overwhelming entire ecosystems. These insights underscored the urgency of addressing the crisis before it spiraled further out of control. Despite the mounting evidence, defense attorneys for Project Nexus fought fiercely to downplay the allegations. They argued that the deaths were coincidental, dismissing the presence of Nexium-9 as mere speculation. They accused the plaintiffs of exaggerating the risks and suggested that banning the material would stifle scientific progress. Their argument struck a chord with some members of the jury, who struggled to reconcile the potential benefits of Nexium-9 with its undeniable dangers. But the tide turned decisively when whistleblower Daniel Harper delivered his testimony. Sitting nervously in the witness box, Daniel recounted his experiences working at Project Nexus, detailing how executives ignored warnings and falsified reports to protect their interests. He described late-night meetings where decisions were made to bury evidence rather than address problems head-on. Most damningly, he produced internal documents proving that senior staff had authorized the improper disposal of Nexium-9 samples, knowingly risking public safety. Daniel's bravery inspired others to come forward. Former employees testified, anonymously sharing stories of intimidation, cover-ups, and unethical practices. One lab assistant revealed that researchers joked about the glow-in-the-dark graveyard near the facility, referring to areas contaminated with metallic particles. Another recounted how supervisors pressured them to falsify data to make the alloy appear safer than it actually was. These accounts eroded any remaining credibility the defendants might have had, leaving them scrambling to defend their actions. Outside the courtroom, public sentiment continued to shift. Protesters gathered daily outside government buildings, holding vigils for victims and demanding justice. Social media campaigns gained traction, with hashtags like Crown Stop Corporate Greed and Honor the Lost trending globally. Celebrities and influencers joined the movement, amplifying calls for reform and accountability. Even children got involved, writing letters to lawmakers urging them to prioritize safety over profit. In response to growing pressure, federal agencies announced sweeping measures to address the crisis. Environmental protection teams launched cleanup operations in communities affected by contamination, removing hazardous materials from soil, water, and air. Health departments set up free testing clinics, offering screenings for early signs of exposure to Nexium-9. Meanwhile, regulatory bodies imposed temporary bans on all research involving similar alloys, pending thorough reviews and updated safety protocols. For Sarah, these developments provided a glimmer of hope. Though nothing could bring John back, she found comfort in knowing that her efforts, and those of countless others, were making a difference. She threw herself into advocacy work, traveling across the country to speak at rallies, town halls, and schools. Her message was simple yet powerful. We must hold those in power accountable. We must demand better, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. Her activism caught the attention of policymakers, who invited her to testify before Congress. Standing before lawmakers, Sarah shared her story, urging them to enact stronger protections for consumers and stricter regulations for corporations. John didn't deserve to die, she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. No one does. Let his death be a wake-up call, a reminder that we cannot sacrifice humanity on the altar of progress. Lawmakers listened intently, moved by Sarah's courage and conviction. In the months that followed, they introduced landmark legislation aimed at preventing similar tragedies in the future. Known as the Safe Science Act, the bill mandated rigorous risk assessments for all experimental projects, required independent oversight committees to monitor compliance, and imposed severe penalties for violations. It also established a fund to support victims and their families, ensuring they received financial assistance and access to medical care. While the bill faced opposition from industry lobbyists, public support proved overwhelming. Citizens flooded congressional offices with calls and emails insisting that action be taken. Eventually, the Safe Science Act passed with bipartisan approval, marking a historic step toward greater accountability in scientific research. Back in court, the verdict arrived after weeks of deliberation. Jurors found Project Nexus guilty on multiple counts, including gross negligence, fraud, and endangerment of public safety. The company was ordered to pay billions in damages to victims and their families, while several executives faced criminal charges ranging from manslaughter to conspiracy. News of the ruling sent shockwaves through corporate boardrooms nationwide, serving as a stark warning about the consequences of putting profits ahead of people. For Sarah, the outcome was both vindication and closure. Though no amount of money could ease her pain, she took solace in knowing that justice had been served. More importantly, she felt proud of the legacy she was building, a legacy rooted in resilience, compassion, and determination. Through her advocacy group, she continued fighting for systemic change, mentoring others affected by similar tragedies, and pushing for global standards in ethical research. Meanwhile, scientists grappled with the implications of Nexium-9. While its dangers were undeniable, so too was its potential. Researchers cautiously resumed studying the alloy, adhering to strict guidelines designed to minimize risks. Early experiments showed promise in treating neurological disorders, offering hope to millions suffering from conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. However, every step forward was accompanied by rigorous scrutiny, ensuring that lessons learned from the crisis weren't forgotten. Public discourse around science evolved significantly in the aftermath of the scandal. Schools incorporated discussions about ethics and responsibility into their curricula, teaching students to weigh the pros and cons of innovation. Museums hosted exhibits exploring the intersection of technology and morality, challenging visitors to think critically about the choices shaping our collective future. Slowly but surely, society began embracing a new paradigm, one that valued progress without sacrificing humanity. As the years passed, John's story became a symbol of hope and resilience. Memorials were erected in his honor, serving as reminders of the importance of vigilance and accountability. Sarah often visited these sites, reflecting on the journey that had transformed her grief into purpose. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, she knew one thing. The aftermath of the Project Nexus scandal marked a turning point in how society viewed scientific advancement. The trial's verdict, coupled with the sweeping reforms introduced by the Safe Science Act, sent shockwaves through industries worldwide. Corporations that had previously operated behind closed doors were now forced to open their books, submit to rigorous inspections, and adhere to strict ethical guidelines. For Sarah, John's wife, this transformation brought both relief and a renewed sense of responsibility. While she celebrated the victories won through her relentless advocacy, she also recognized that the work was far from over. In the months following the trial, Sarah became a household name, a symbol of resilience and justice. Her story resonated with millions who saw in her not just a grieving widow, but a fighter determined to protect others from similar tragedies. Media outlets clamored for interviews, universities invited her to deliver keynote speeches, and advocacy groups sought her counsel on campaigns related to corporate accountability. Despite the attention, Sarah remained grounded, focusing on what truly mattered, ensuring that no family would ever have to endure the pain she felt after losing John. Her advocacy group, which she named the Ripple Effect, grew exponentially as more victims' families joined forces with her. Together, they formed a network spanning multiple states, pooling resources and sharing information to hold corporations accountable. The organization's mission extended beyond seeking compensation for those harmed. It aimed to educate the public about the risks of unchecked innovation and empower citizens to demand transparency from powerful entities. Workshops, webinars, and community forums became regular fixtures in cities across the country, drawing crowds eager to learn and contribute. One of the most impactful initiatives launched by the Ripple Effect was a nationwide awareness campaign called Know Your Risks. Through partnerships with schools, healthcare providers, and environmental organizations, the campaign distributed educational materials explaining the dangers of experimental technologies like Nexium-9. Flyers, videos, and interactive exhibits highlighted real-life stories of victims, emphasizing the importance of vigilance and proactive measures. Children learned about the crisis in age-appropriate ways, participating in classroom activities designed to foster critical thinking about science and ethics. Parents received guides on identifying potential signs of exposure to hazardous materials, empowering them to take action if they suspected contamination in their communities. Meanwhile, researchers working under the newly established oversight committees cautiously resumed studying Nexium-9, adhering to stringent safety protocols. Laboratories transformed into high-security environments, equipped with state-of-the-art containment, systems to prevent leaks or accidents. Scientists wore protective gear at all times, and every experiment underwent multiple rounds of review before approval. Data collection processes were standardized, ensuring accurate and unbiased reporting. These changes reflected a broader cultural shift toward prioritizing human safety above all else. Early findings from these controlled studies offered glimpses of hope. When properly managed, Nexium-9 demonstrated remarkable potential for repairing damaged neural pathways, a breakthrough that could revolutionize treatments for neurological disorders. Preliminary trials involving patients with spinal cord injuries showed promising results, with some regaining partial mobility after years of paralysis. Similarly, Alzheimer's patients exhibited improved cognitive function, recalling memories thought lost forever. These successes reignited debates about whether banning the alloy outright might hinder progress, leading to calls for balanced approaches that maximized benefits while minimizing risks. However, skepticism persisted. Many questioned whether humanity could ever fully control something as unpredictable as Nexium-9. Critics argued that even with safeguards in place, the alloy's self-replicating nature posed too great a threat to warrant continued research. They pointed to historical examples of well-intentioned innovations gone awry, like asbestos and thalidomide, as cautionary tales. Others expressed concerns about unequal access to such advanced treatments, fearing that only wealthy individuals or nations would reap the rewards, while marginalized communities bore the brunt of any fallout. Public discourse around these issues intensified, fueled by documentaries, podcasts, and social media discussions. Journalists delved deeper into the complexities of balancing innovation with ethics, interviewing experts from diverse fields to present nuanced perspectives. Filmmakers produced gripping narratives inspired by John's story, blending fact and fiction to explore themes of accountability, ambition, and redemption. These creative works kept the conversation alive, ensuring that the lessons of the crisis weren't forgotten. Amidst this ongoing dialogue, Sarah found herself reflecting on the paradox of progress. She understood the allure of pushing boundaries, the thrill of discovery, and the promise of improving lives. But she also knew firsthand the devastating consequences of neglecting caution and compassion. During one particularly poignant speech, she addressed this duality directly. Science is a tool, not a master. It can heal or harm, depending on how we wield it. Our job is to ensure that it serves humanity, not the other way around. Her words struck a chord with audiences worldwide, inspiring them to think critically about the role of technology in their own lives. People began asking tougher questions of the companies producing the products they use daily. Was this gadget manufactured ethically? Were sustainable practices employed in creating this medication? Could this innovation inadvertently cause harm down the line? This heightened awareness signaled a cultural shift, one where consumers demanded more than convenience, they demanded integrity. For Sarah, this change validated years of hard work, yet she refused to rest on her laurels. Recognizing that systemic problems required long-term solutions, she expanded the ripple effect's scope to include international advocacy. Collaborating with global organizations, she pushed for universal standards governing experimental research, arguing that crises like the one caused by Nexium-9 transcended borders. Her efforts led to landmark agreements between nations, establishing shared frameworks for monitoring and regulating emerging technologies. Back home, Sarah focused on preserving John's legacy. She commissioned a memorial garden in his honor, located near the mall where he had died. Designed as a tranquil space for reflection, the garden featured plaques commemorating victims of the Nexium-9 crisis, along with sculptures symbolizing resilience and unity. Visitors often left flowers, notes, and mementos, transforming the site into a living tribute to those lost. On anniversaries of John's passing, Sarah organized candlelight vigils there, inviting families to share memories and reaffirm their commitment to preventing future tragedies. These gatherings reinforced the bonds forged through shared grief and determination. Many attendees credited Sarah with helping them navigate their own journeys of healing and activism. One woman, whose husband had succumbed to complications linked to Nexium-9, tearfully thanked Sarah during a vigil. "You've given us a voice. When we felt voiceless," she said. "Because of you, my kids will grow up in a world where people care enough to fight for what's right." Such moments filled Sarah with gratitude, reminding her why she continued despite the challenges. Though the scars of losing John never faded completely, she found solace in knowing that his death had sparked meaningful change. Every policy enacted, every life saved, and every mind awakened to the importance of ethical science felt like a step closer to honoring him. As time passed, Sarah noticed subtle shifts in societal attitudes. Conversations about innovation increasingly centered on inclusivity and sustainability. Entrepreneurs embraced green technologies, designing products that minimized environmental impact. Educators emphasized empathy alongside technical skills, teaching students to consider the broader implications of their work. Even corporations, once resistant to change, adopted socially responsible practices, recognizing that doing good was good business. These transformations didn't happen overnight, nor were they perfect. Challenges remained, and new controversies arose as humanity continued to grapple with the complexities of progress. But the foundation laid by Sarah and countless others ensured that future generations approached science with greater mindfulness and accountability. Years later, looking back on everything she had accomplished, Sarah realized that John's legacy wasn't defined solely by his tragic death. It was defined by the movement he inspired, a movement rooted in love, courage, and an unwavering belief in the possibility of a better tomorrow. And though she missed him every day, she took comfort in knowing that his memory lived on, not just in monuments or headlines, but in the hearts of everyone committed to building a safer, kinder world. Through it all, Sarah remained steadfast in her conviction that ordinary people could drive extraordinary change. As she often reminded herself, and anyone willing to listen, we may not be able to undo the past, but we can shape the future. Together, we are stronger than fear, greed, or indifference. Together, we can create ripples that turn into waves. Years after the NXIVM 9 scandal, the world had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The ripple effects of John's death, and the subsequent revelations about Project Nexus, had reshaped not only how society approached science, but also how individuals viewed their role in shaping the future. For Sarah, the journey that began with unimaginable loss had transformed into a lifelong mission to ensure that humanity never forgot the lessons learned from this tragedy. And yet, as she looked around at the progress made, she couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet reflection. Her fight had brought about meaningful change, but it was clear that vigilance would always be necessary. The memorial garden dedicated to John had become a symbol of hope and resilience. What started as a quiet space for grieving families evolved into a gathering place for activists, educators, and innovators alike. School groups visited regularly, learning about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of ethical responsibility. Artists painted murals on its walls depicting themes of unity and accountability, while musicians performed songs inspired by stories of courage and perseverance. Each year, thousands attended the annual vigil held there, lighting candles in honor of those lost and reaffirming their commitment to protecting others from similar fates. Sarah often stood quietly among the crowd during these events, listening to speeches and sharing conversations with people whose lives had been touched by her advocacy. Many spoke of how John's story motivated them to pursue careers in fields like environmental science, public health, or policy reform. Others shared personal anecdotes about standing up against corporate negligence in their own communities. These moments reminded Sarah that even in the face of immense pain, there was power in collective action. Together, they were creating a legacy far greater than any one individual could achieve alone. Meanwhile, scientific research continued under the watchful eyes of newly established oversight committees. Laboratories adhered to strict protocols, designed to prevent another catastrophe like NXIVM 9. Independent auditors conducted surprise inspections, ensuring compliance with safety standards. Researchers worked collaboratively, sharing data openly to avoid duplicating mistakes of the past. While some lamented the slower pace of innovation, most agreed that the trade-off was worth it if it meant safeguarding human lives. Breakthroughs did emerge, albeit cautiously. Controlled studies involving modified versions of NXIVM 9 showed promise in treating conditions once considered untreatable. Patients with severe neurological disorders regained abilities thought permanently lost. Children born with rare genetic mutations saw improvements in motor skills and cognitive function. Yet every success came with meticulous documentation and transparent reporting. Scientists acknowledged the risks inherent in their work, emphasizing that caution must always outweigh haste when dealing with technologies capable of altering life itself. Public trust in science slowly rebuilt over time, thanks in large part to efforts led by advocates like Sarah. Campaigns promoting transparency and accountability became mainstream, encouraging citizens to engage actively in discussions about emerging technologies. Social media platforms hosted forums where experts answered questions from curious minds, demystifying complex topics and fostering informed decision-making. Schools incorporated case studies of the NXIVM 9 crisis into their curricula, teaching students to weigh the benefits of innovation against potential consequences. For Sarah, education remained a cornerstone of her advocacy. She traveled extensively, speaking at conferences, universities, and community centers about the importance of balancing curiosity with compassion. Her talks often began with a simple question: what kind of world do we want to leave behind? From there, she wove together personal anecdotes, historical examples, and philosophical insights, urging audiences to think critically about their choices. Whether addressing a room full of policymakers or a classroom of eager teenagers, her message resonated deeply. Progress should serve humanity, not exploit it. Her influence extended beyond national borders as well. Through partnerships with international organizations, Sarah helped establish global frameworks for monitoring experimental research. Countries signed treaties pledging cooperation in regulating hazardous materials and sharing best practices for risk management. Disasters that might have gone unnoticed in remote regions now received immediate attention, thanks to networks connecting scientists, activists, and governments worldwide. This collaborative spirit marked a departure from the secrecy and competition that had characterized earlier eras of scientific exploration. Back home, Sarah found solace in small victories. Families affected by the crisis received financial support and access to medical care through funds established under the Safe Science Act. Communities contaminated by Nexium-9 underwent thorough cleanups, restoring ecosystems and improving quality of life. Former employees of Project Nexus, emboldened by whistleblower protections, came forward with additional evidence exposing other unethical practices within the facility. Each step forward reinforced Sarah's belief that justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about healing and prevention. Yet challenges persisted. New technologies emerged almost daily, each carrying its own set of risks and rewards. Artificial intelligence, gene editing, and nanotechnology sparked debates reminiscent of those surrounding Nexium-9. Would these innovations save lives or endanger them? Could humanity resist the temptation to prioritize profit over people? Sarah knew that the answers depended on maintaining the momentum gained during the crisis. Complacency, she warned, was the greatest threat to lasting change. To combat this, she launched an initiative called Future Guardians, aimed at mentoring young leaders passionate about ethical science. Participants attended workshops, interned with advocacy groups, and collaborated on projects addressing real-world issues. Many went on to become influential voices in their respective fields, championing causes aligned with Sarah's vision. Seeing their enthusiasm rekindled her own, reminding her that the fight for a better tomorrow was ongoing. As the years passed, Sarah reflected on the paradox of her journey. Losing John had shattered her world, leaving her adrift in a sea of grief and anger. But out of that darkness she had forged something beautiful, a movement rooted in love, courage, and an unshakable belief in humanity's capacity for good. Though she missed him every day, she took comfort in knowing that his memory lived on, not just in monuments or headlines, but in the countless lives he had indirectly touched. On the 10th anniversary of John's passing, Sarah organized a special event at the Memorial Garden. Hundreds gathered, including friends, family, victims' relatives, and supporters from around the globe. As dusk fell, lanterns illuminated the space, casting soft light on plaques bearing names of those lost to the crisis. Speakers shared stories of resilience and gratitude, celebrating the progress achieved since that fateful day in the mall. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she stood before the crowd, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. 10 years ago, she began, we faced a tragedy that seemed impossible to comprehend. A man walked into a mall, bought groceries for his family, and never came home. His death revealed truths we weren't ready to hear, but truths we desperately needed to know. Today we honor him not with sorrow, but with action. We honor him by continuing to ask tough questions, demand accountability, and strive for a world where science serves everyone equally. She paused, scanning the faces before her. Some nodded in agreement, others wiped away tears. John taught me many things, she continued. He taught me the value of kindness, the joy of simple moments, and the strength found in community. Most importantly, he taught me that even in our darkest hours, we have the power to create light. So let us carry that light forward, together. The crowd erupted in applause, echoing her words with cheers of solidarity. As fireworks lit up the night sky, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead still held uncertainties, but she knew that as long as people cared enough to fight for what was right, Hope would prevail. John's legacy wasn't defined by his tragic death. It was defined by the movement he inspired, a testament to the enduring power of love and determination. And so, the story of a man who suddenly died in a mall became more than just a cautionary tale. It became a beacon guiding humanity toward a brighter, safer, and more compassionate future. For Sarah, and for all those who carried his memory in their hearts, John's life and death would forever remind them of the boundless possibilities that arise when ordinary people choose to stand up, speak out, and make a difference.